Incarnate teachers and incarnation. Wherever his name is spoken, that very place is holy. How much more so is the man who speaks his name? And with that veneration, ought we to approach that man out of whom comes to us spiritual truth? Such great teachers of spiritual truth are indeed very few in number in this world. But the world is never altogether without them. They are always the fairest flowers of human life. Ahatu Kadaya Sindhu, the ocean of mercy without any motive. Acharyam Mam Vijaniyat, know the Guru to be me, says Sri Krishna in a Bhagavata. The moment the world is absolutely bereft of these, it becomes a hideous hell and hastens on to its destruction. Higher and nobler than all ordinary ones are another set of teachers, the avatars of Ishvara in the world. They can transmit spirituality with a touch, even with a mere wish. The lowest and the most degraded characters become in 1 second saints at their command. They are the teachers of all teachers, the highest manifestations of God through man. We cannot see God except through them. We cannot help worshipping them. And indeed, they are the only ones whom we are bound to worship. No man can really see God except through these human manifestations. If we try to see God otherwise, we make for ourselves a hideous caricature of Him and believes the caricature to be no worse than the original. There's a story of an ignorant man who was asked to make an image of God Shiva, and who, after days of hard struggle, manufactured only the image of a monkey. So, whenever we try to think of God as He is in His absolute perfection, we invariably meet with the most miserable failure because, as long as we are men, we cannot conceive Him as anything higher than man. The time will come when we shall transcend our human nature and know Him as He is. But as long as we are men, we must worship Him in man and as man. Talk as you may, try as you may, you cannot think of God except as a man. You may deliver great intellectual discourses on God and on all those things under the sun. Become great rationalists and prove to your satisfaction that all these accounts of the avatars of God as man are nonsense. But let us come for a moment to practical common sense. What is there behind this kind of remarkable intellect? Zero. Nothing. Simply so much froth. When next you hear a man delivering a great intellectual lecture against this worship of the avatars of God, get hold of him and ask what his idea of God is, what he understands by omnipotence, omnipresence, and all similar terms beyond the spelling of the words. He really means nothing by them. He cannot formulate as their meaning any idea unaffected by his own human nature. He is no better off in this matter than the man in the street who has not read a single book. That man in the street, however, is quiet and does not disturb the peace of the world, while this big talker creates disturbance and misery among mankind. Religion is, after all, realization, and we must make the sharpest distinction between talk and intuitive experience. What we experience in the depths of our soul is realization. Nothing indeed is so uncommon as common sense in regard to this matter. By our present constitution, we are limited and bound to see God as man. If, for instance, the buffaloes want to worship God, they will, in keeping with their own nature, see him as a huge buffalo. If a fish wants to worship God, it will have to form an idea of him as a big fish, and man has to think of him as man. And these various conceptions are not due to morbidly active imagination. Man, the buffalo, and the fish all may be supposed to represent so many different vessels, so to say. All these vessels to the sea of God to get filled with water, each according to its own shape and capacity. In the man, the water takes the shape of man. In the buffalo, the shape of a buffalo, and in the fish, the shape of a fish. In each of these vessels, there is the same water of the sea of God. When men see him, they see him as man. And the animals, if they have any conception of God at all, must see him as animal, each according to its own ideal. So we cannot help seeing God as man, and therefore we are bound to worship him as man. There is no other way. Two kinds of men do not worship God as man: the human brute who has no religion, and the Paramhansa who has risen above all the weaknesses of humanity and has transcended the limits of his own human nature. To him, all nature has become his own self. He alone can worship God as he is. Here, too, as in all other cases, the two extremes meet: the extreme of ignorance and the other extreme of knowledge. Neither of these go through acts of worship. The human brute does not worship because of his ignorance, and the Jivan free souls, do not worship because they have realized God in themselves. Being between these two poles of existence, if anyone tells you that he is not going to worship God as man, take kindly care of that man. He is, not to use any harsher term, an irresponsible talker. His religion is for unsound and empty brains. God understands human fallings and become man to do good to humanity. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirбhavati bharatah abhyutthanamadharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham paritrāణāya sadhūnām vināṣāya ca dushkritām dharma sansthapanarthāya sambhavami yuge yuge. Whenever virtue subsides and wickedness prevails, I manifest myself. To establish virtue, to destroy evil, to save the good, I come from yuga to yuga, age to age. Avjananti mam moodha manushim tanumashritam param bhavamajananto mam bhutamehasharam. Fools deride me who have assumed the human form without knowing my real nature as the Lord of the universe. Such is Sri Krishna's declaration in the Gita on incarnation. When a huge tidal wave comes, says Bhagwan Sri Ramakrishna, all the little brooks and ditches become full to the brim without any effort or consciousness on their own part. So when an incarnation comes, a tidal wave of spirituality breaks upon the world, and people feel spirituality almost full in the air. The mantra, Om, word, and wisdom. But we are now considering not these Mahapurushas, the great incarnations, but only the Siddha Gurus, teachers who have attained the goal. They, as a rule, have to convey the germs of spiritual wisdom to the disciple by means of words, mantras, to be meditated upon. What are these mantras? The whole of this universe has, according to Indian philosophy, both name and form, Nam, Rupa, as its conditions of manifestation. In the human microcosm, there cannot be a single wave in the mind stuff, chitta-vritti, unconditioned by name and form. If it be true that nature is built throughout on the same plan, this kind of conditioning by name and form must also be the plan of the building of the whole of the cosmos. Yatha eke nimriti pindain sarvam mrinmayam vigyat syat. As one lump of clay being known, all things of clay are known. So, the knowledge of the microcosm must lead to the knowledge of macrocosm. Now, form is the outer crust, of which the name or the idea is the inner sense or kernel. The body is the form, and the mind or the antahakarana is the name. The sound symbols are universally associated with nama, name, in all beings having the power of speech. In the individual man, the thought waves rising in the limited mahat or chit, mind stuff, must manifest themselves first as words and then as the more concrete forms. In the universe, Brahma or Hiranyagarbha or the cosmic Mahat first manifested himself as name and then as form. That is, as this universe. All this expressed sensible universe is the form, behind which stands the eternal, inexpressible Spoda, the manifester as logos or word. This eternal Spoda, the essential eternal material of all ideas or names, is the power through which the Lord creates the universe. Nay, the Lord first becomes conditioned as the Spoda and then evolves himself out as the yet more concrete sensible universe. This Spoda has one word as its only possible symbol, and this is the Om. And as by no possible means of analysis can we separate the word from the idea, this Om and the eternal Spoda are inseparable. And therefore, it is out of this holiest of all holy words, the mother of all names and forms, the eternal Om, that the whole universe may be supposed to have been created. But it may be said that although thought and word are inseparable, yet as there may be various word symbols for the same thought, it is not necessary that this particular word Om should be the word representative of the thought, out of which the universe has become manifested. To this objection, we reply that this Om is the only possible symbol which covers the whole ground, and there is none other like it. The Spoda is the material of all words, yet it is not any definite word in its fully formed state. That is to say, if all the peculiarities which distinguish one word from another be removed, then what remains will be the Spoda. Therefore, this Spoda is called the Nad Brahma, the sound Brahman. Now, as every word symbol intended to express the inexpressible Spoda will so particularize it that it will no longer be the Spoda, that symbol which particularizes it the least and at the same time most approximately expresses its nature, will be the truest symbol thereof. And this is the Om, and the Om only, because these three letters A, U, M, pronounced in combination as Om, may well be the generalized symbol of all possible sounds. May well be the generalized symbol of all possible sounds. The letter A is the least differentiated of all sounds. Therefore, Krishna says in the Gita, Aksharanam akaro asmi. I am A among the letters. Again, all articulate sounds are produced in the space within the mouth, beginning with the root of the tongue and ending in the lips. The throat sound is A. And M is the last lip sound. And the U exactly represents the rolling forward of the impulse which begins at the root of the tongue till it ends in the lips. If properly pronounced, this Om will represent the whole phenomenon of sound production, and no other word can do this. And this, therefore, is the fittest symbol of this Buddha, which is the real meaning of the Om. And as the symbol can never be separated from the thing signified, the Om and the Svara are one. And as the Svara, being the finer side of the manifested universe, is nearer to God, and is indeed that first manifestation of divine wisdom, this Om is truly symbolic of God. Again, just as the one only Brahman, the Akhanda Satchidananda, the undivided existence, knowledge, bliss, can be conceived by imperfect human souls only from particular standpoints and associated with particular qualities. So, this universe, his body, has also to be thought of along the line of the thinker's mind. The direction of the worshipper's mind is guided by its prevailing elements or tattvas. The result is that the same God will be seen in various manifestations as the professor of various predominant qualities, and the same universe will appear as full of manifold forms. Even as in the case of the least differentiated and the most universal symbol, Om, thought and sound symbol are seen to be inseparably associated with each other. So, also, this law of their inseparable association applies to the many differentiated views of the God and the universe. Each of them, therefore, must have a particular word symbol to express it. These word symbols evolved out of the deepest spiritual perception of sages, symbolize and express, as nearly as possible, the particular view of God and the universe they stand for. And as the Om represents the Akhanda, the undifferentiated Brahman, the other represent the Khanda or the differentiated views of the same being, and they are all helpful to divine meditation and the acquisition of true knowledge. Worship of substitutes and images. The next points to be considered are the worship of pratikas or of things more or less satisfactory as substitutes for God, and the worship of pratimas or images. What is the worship of God through a pratika? It is abrahmani brahmadrashtaya anusandhanam, joining the mind with devotion to that which is not Brahman, taking it to be Brahman, says Bhagwan Ramanuj. Worship the mind as Brahman, this is internal, and the Akash as Brahman. This is with regard to the Devas, says Shankara. The mind is an internal pratika. The Akash is an external one, and both have to be worshipped as substitutes of God. He continues, similarly, the sun is a Brahman. This is the command. He who worships name as Brahman in all such passages, the doubt arises as to the worship of pratikas. The word pratika means going toward, and worshipping a pratika is worshipping something as a substitute, which is in someone or more respects like Brahman more and more, but is not Brahman. Along with the pratikas mentioned in the Shrutis, there are various others to be found in the Puranas and Tantras. In this kind of pratika worship may be included all the various forms of Pitra worship and Deva worship. Now, worshipping Ishvara and Him alone is bhakti. The worship of anything else, Deva or Pitra or any other being, cannot be bhakti. The various kind of worship of the various devas are all to be included in ritualistic karma, which gives to the worshipper only a particular result in the form of some celestial enjoyment, but can neither give rise to bhakti nor lead to mukti. One thing, therefore, has to be carefully borne in mind. If, as it may happen in some cases, the highly philosophic ideal, the supreme Brahman, is dragged down by pratika worship to the level of pratika, and the pratika itself is taken to the Atman of the worshipper or his antaryamin, inner ruler, the worshipper gets entirely misled, as no pratika can really be the Atman of the worshipper. But where Brahmana himself is the object of worship, and the pratika stands only as a substitute or a suggestion thereof, that is to say, where through the pratika the omnipresent Brahman is worshipped, the pratika itself being idealized into the cause of all Brahman, the worship is positively beneficial. Nay, it is absolutely necessary for all mankind until they have all got beyond the primary or preparatory state of mind in regard to worship. When, therefore, any gods or other beings are worshipped in and for themselves, such worship is only a ritualistic karma. And as avidya, science, is given us only the fruit belonging to that particular vidya, but when the devas or any other beings are looked upon as Brahman and worshipped, the result obtained is the same as by the worshipping of Ishvara. This explains how, in many cases, both in Shrutis and the Smritis, a god or a sage or some other extraordinary being is taken up and lifted, as it were, out of his own nature and idealized into Brahman, and is then worshipped. Says the Advaitin, is not everything Brahman when the name and the form have been removed from it? Is not he, the Lord, the innermost self of every one? Says the Vishishta Advaitin, Phalam Adityadyapasaneshu Brahmeva dasyati sarvadhyakshitvat. The fruition of even the worship of Adityas, etc., Brahman himself bestows because he is the ruler of all, says Shankara in his Brahma Sutra Bhashya. Idrasham chatra brahmana upasatyam yatah pratikeshu tat drishtaya dhvaropanam pratimadishu eva vishnavadinam. Here, in this way, does Brahmana become the object of worship, because he, as Brahman, is superimposed on the pratikas, just as Vishnu, etc., are superimposed upon images, etc. The same ideas apply to the worship of the pratimas as to that of the pratikas. That is to say, if the image stands for a god or a saint, the worship is not the result of bhakti and does not lead to liberation. But if it stands for one God, the worship thereof will bring both bhakti and mukti. Of the principal religions of the world, we see Vedantism, Buddhism, and certain forms of Christianity freely using images. Only two religions, Mohammedanism and Protestantism, refuse such help. Yet, the Mohammedans use the grave of their saints and martyrs almost in the place of images, and the Protestants, in rejecting all concrete help to religion, are drifting away every year, farther and farther from spirituality, till at present there is scarcely any difference between the advanced Protestants and the followers of Auguste Comte or agnostics who preach ethics alone. Again, In Christianity and Mohammedanism, whatever exists of image worship is made to fall under that category, in which the pratika or the pratima is worshipped in itself, but not as a help to the vision, drishti sukaryam of God. Therefore, it is at best only of the nature of ritualistic karmas and cannot produce either bhakti or mukti. In this form of image worship, the allegiance of the soul is given to other things than Ishvara, and therefore such use of images or graves or temples or tombs is real idolatry. It is in itself neither sinful nor wicked. It is a right, a karma, and worshippers must and will get the fruit thereof. The chosen ideal. The next thing to be considered is what we know as Ishtanistha. One who aspires to be a bhakta must know that so many opinions are so many ways. He must know that all the various sects of the various religions are the various manifestations of the glory of the same Lord. They call you by so many names. They divide you, as it were by different names, yet in each one of these is to be found your omnipotence. You reach the worshipper through all of these. Neither is there any special time, so long as the soul has intense love for you. You are so easy of approach. It is my misfortune that I cannot love you. Not only this, the bhakta must take care not to hate, nor even to criticize those radiant sons of light who are the founders of various sects. He must not even hear them spoken ill of. Very few indeed are those who are at once the possessors of an extensive sympathy and power of appreciation, as well as an intensity of love. We find, as a rule, that liberal and sympathetic sects lose the intensity of religious feeling, and in their hands, religion is apt to degenerate into a kind of politico social club life. On the other hand, intensely narrow sectaries, whilst displaying a very commendable love of their own ideals, are seen to have acquired every particle of that love by hating everyone who is not of exactly the same opinions as themselves. Would to God that this world was full of men who were as intense in their love as worldwide in their sympathies. But such are only few and far between. Yet we know that it is practicable to educate large numbers of human beings into the ideal of a wonderful blending of both the width and the intensity of love. And the way to do that is by this path of Ishtanistha, or steadfast devotion to the chosen ideal. Every sect of every religion presents only one ideal of its own to mankind. But the eternal Vedantic religion opens to mankind as infinite number of doors for ingress into the inner shrine of divinity and places before humanity an almost inexhaustible array of ideals, there being in each of them a manifestation of the Eternal One. With the kindest solicitude, the Vedanta points out to aspiring men and women the numerous roads hewn out of the solid rock of the realities of human life by the glorious sons or human manifestations of God in the past and in the present, and stands with outstretched arms to welcome all, to welcome even those that are yet to be, to that home of truth and that ocean of bliss wherein the human soul, liberated from the net of Maya, may transport itself with perfect freedom and with eternal joy. Bhakti Yoga, therefore, lays on us the imperative command not to hate or deny any one of the various paths that lead to salvation. Yet the growing plant must be hedged round to protect it until it has grown into a tree. The tender plant of spirituality will die if exposed too early to the action of a constant change of ideas and ideals. Many people, in the name of what may be called religious liberalism, may be seen feeding their idle curiosity with a continuous succession of different ideals. With them, hearing new things grows into a kind of disease, a sort of religious drink mania. They want to hear new things just by way of getting a temporary nervous excitement. And when one such exciting influence has had its effect on them, they are ready for another. Religion is, with these people, a sort of intellectual opium eating, and there it ends. There is another sort of man, says Bhagavan Ramakrishna, who is like the pearl oyster of the story. The pearl oyster leaves its bed at the bottom of the sea and comes up to the surface to catch the rainwater when the star Swati is in the ascendant. It floats about on the surface of the sea with its shell wide open until it has succeeded in catching a drop of the rainwater, and then it dives deep down to its seabed and there rests until it has succeeded in fashioning a beautiful pearl out of that raindrop. This is indeed the most poetical and forcible way in which the theory of Ishtanistha has ever been put. This Ekanistha, or devotion to one ideal, is absolutely necessary for the beginner in the practice of religious devotion. He must say with Hanuman in the Ramayana, "Though I know that the Lord of Shri and the Lord of Janaki are both manifestations of the same Supreme Being, yet my all in all is the lotus-eyed Ram." Or as was said by the sage Tulsidas, he must say, "Take the sweetness of all, sit with all, take the name of all, say yea, yea, but keep your seat firm." Then, if the devotional aspirant is sincere, out of this little seed will come a gigantic tree, like the Indian banyan, sending out branch after branch and root after root to all sides, till it covers the entire field of religion. Thus will the true devotee realize that he, who was his own ideal in life, is worshipped in all ideals, by all sects, under all names, and through all forms. The method and the means. In regard to the method and the means of Bhakti Yoga, we read in the commentary of Bhagavan Ramanuj on the Vedanta Sutras. The attaining of that comes through discrimination, controlling the passions, practice, sacrificial work, purity, strength, and suppression of excessive joy. Vivek or discrimination is, according to Ramanuj, discriminating, among other things, the pure food from the impure. According to him, food becomes impure from three causes. 1. By the nature of the food itself, as in the case of garlic, etc. 2. Owing to its coming from wicked and accursed persons. And 3. From physical impurities such as dirt or hair, etc. The Shruti says when the food is pure, the sattva element gets purified and the memory becomes unwavering. And Ramanuja quotes this, the 𝐯𝐚𝐤𝐬𝐤𝐿 Upanishad. The question of food has always been one of the most vital and the bhaktas, apart from the extravagance into which some of the bhakti sects have run. There is a great truth underlying this question of food. We must remember that, according to the Sankhya philosophy, the sattva, rajasa, and tamas, which in the state of homogeneous equilibrium form the prakriti, and in the heterogeneous disturbed condition form the universe, are both the substance and the quality of prakriti. As such, they are the materials out of which every human form has been manufactured, and the predominance of the sattva material is what is absolutely necessary for spiritual development. The materials which we receive through our food into our body structure go a great way to determine our mental constitution. Therefore, the food we eat has to be particularly taken care of. However, in this matter, as in others, the fanaticism into which the disciples invariably fall is not to be laid at the door of the masters. And this discrimination of food is, after all, of secondary importance. The very same passage quoted above is explained by Shankara in his Bhashya on the Upanishads in a different way by giving an entirely different meaning to the word ahara, translated generally as food. According to him, that which is gathered in is ahara. The knowledge of the sensations, such as sound, etc., is gathered in for the enjoyment of the enjoyer, self. The purification of the knowledge, which gathers in the perception of the senses, is the purifying of the food, ahara. The word purification of food means the acquiring of the knowledge of sensations untouched by the defects of attachment, aversion, and delusion. Such is the meaning. Therefore, such knowledge or ahara being purified, the sattva material of the possessor, the internal organ, will become purified. And the sattva being purified, an unbroken memory of the infinite one, who has been known in his real nature from scriptures, will result. These two explanations are apparently conflicting, yet both are true and necessary. The manipulating and controlling of what may be called the finer body, viz., the mood, are no doubt higher functions than the controlling of the grosser body of flesh. But the control of the grosser is absolutely necessary to enable one to arrive at the control of the finer. The beginner, therefore, must pay particular attention to all such dietetic rules as have come down from the line of his accredited teachers. But the extravagant, meaningless fanaticism which has driven religion entirely to the kitchen, as may be noticed in the case of many of our sects, without any hope of the noble truth of that religion ever coming out to the sunlight of spirituality, is a peculiar sort of pure and simple materialism. It is neither jnana, nor bhakti, nor karma. It is a special kind of lunacy, and those who pin their souls to it are more likely to go to lunatic asylums than to Brahmaloka. So it stands to reason that discrimination in the choice of food is necessary for the attainment of this higher state of mental composition, which cannot be easily obtained otherwise. Controlling the passions is the next thing to be attended to. To restrain the indriyas, organs, from going toward the objects of the senses, to control them and bring them under the guidance of the will, is the very central virtue in religious culture. Then comes the practice of self-restraint and self-denial. All the immense possibilities of divine realization in the soul cannot get actualized without struggle and without such practice on the part of the aspiring devotee. The mind must always think of the Lord. It is very hard at first to compel the mind to think of the Lord always, but with every new effort, the power to do so grows stronger in us. By practice, O son of Kunti, and by non attachment is it attained, says Sri Krishna in the Gita. And then, as to sacrificial work, it is understood that the five great sacrificed to gods, sages, mains, guests, and all creatures, Panch Mahajanya, have to be performed as usual. Purity is absolutely the basic work, the bedrock upon which the whole bhakti building rests. Cleansing the external body and discriminating the food are both easy, but without internal cleanliness and purity, these external observances are of no value whatsoever. In the list of qualities conducive to purity, as given by Ramanuj, there are enumerated Satya, truthfulness, Arjava, sincerity, Daya, doing good to others without any gain to one's self, Ahimsa, not injuring others by thought, word, or deed, Anabhidya, not coveting others' goods, not thinking vain thoughts, and not brooding over injuries received from others. In this list, the one idea that deserves special notice is ahimsa, non injury to others. This duty of non injury is, so to speak, obligatory on us in relation to all beings. As with some, it does not simply mean the non injuring of human beings and mercilessness towards the lower animals, nor, as with some others, does it mean the protecting of cats and dogs and feeding of ants with sugar, with liberty to injure brother man in every horrible way. It is remarkable that almost every good idea in this world can be carried to a disgusting extreme. A good practice carried to an extreme and worked in accordance with the letter of the law becomes a positive evil. The stinking monks of certain religious sects who do not bathe lest the vermin on their bodies should be killed never think of the discomfort and disease they bring to their fellow human beings. They do not, however, belong to the religion of the Vedas. The test of ahimsa is absence of jealousy. Any man may do a good deed or make a good gift on the spur of the moment, or under the pressure of some superstition or priestcraft, but the real lover of mankind is he who is jealous of none. The so called great men of the world may all be seen to become jealous of each other for a small name, for a little fame, and for a few bits of gold. So long as this jealousy exists in a heart, it is far away from the perfection of ahimsa. The cow does not eat meat, nor does the sheep. Are they great yogis? Great non injurers? Any fool may abstain from eating this or that. Surely that gives him no more distinction than to herbivorous animals. The man who will mercilessly cheat widows and orphans and do the vilest deeds for money is worse than any brute, even if he lives entirely on grass. The man whose heart never cherishes even the thought of injury to anyone, who rejoices at the prosperity of even his greatest enemy, that man is the bhakta, he is the yogi. He is the guru of all, even though he lives every day of his life on the flesh of swine. Therefore, we must always remember that external practices have value only as helps to develop internal purity. It is better to have internal purity alone when minute attention to external observances is not practicable. But woe unto the man and woe unto the nation that forgets the real, internal, spiritual essentials of religion and mechanically clutches with death like grasp at all external forms and never lets them go. The forms have value only so far as they are expressions of the life within. If they have ceased to express life, crush them out without mercy. The next means to the attainment of Bhakti Yoga is strength, anavasada. This Atma is not to be attained by the weak, says the Shruti. Both physical weaknesses and mental weaknesses are meant here. The strong, the hardy, are the only fit students. What can puny, little, decrepit things do? They will break to pieces whenever the mysterious forces of the body and mind are even slightly awakened by the practice of any of the yogas. It is the young, the healthy, the strong that can score success. Physical strength, therefore, is absolutely necessary. It is the strong body alone that can bear the shock of reaction resulting from the attempt to control the organs. He who wants to become a bhakta must be strong, must be healthy. When the miserably weak attempt any of the yogas, they are likely to get some incurable malady or they weaken their minds. Voluntarily weakening the body is really no prescription for spiritual enlightenment. The mentally weak also cannot succeed in attaining the Atman. The person who aspires to be a bhakta must be cheerful. In the Western world, the idea of a religious man is that he never smiles, that a dark cloud must always hang over his face, which, again, must be long drawn with the jaws almost collapsed. People with emaciated bodies and long faces are fit subjects for the physician. They are not yogis. It is the cheerful mind that is preserving. It is the strong mind that hews its way through 1,000 difficulties. And this, the hardest task of all, the cutting of our way out to the net of Maya, is the work reserved only for giant wills. Yet, at the same time, excessive mirth should be avoided. Anudarsha. Excessive mirth makes us unfit for serious thought. It also fritters away the energies of the mind in vain. The stronger the will, the less the yielding to the sway of the emotions. Excessive hilarity is quite as objectionable as too much of sad seriousness, and all religious realization is possible only when the mind is in a steady, peaceful condition of harmonious equilibrium. It is thus that one may begin to learn how to love the Lord.